Please be seated. It's so lovely to see so many of my young friends. And just watching those acolytes, when I started, they were this big. They're taller than I am now. It's truly amazing to have been here and watched them grow. I am so grateful for my time here and so grateful for all of you. But I want to talk about the gospel this morning. This is the Beatitudes. There are 8 of them. And Jesus tells his disciples the Beatitudes story after he has worked with them for a while. So he's been preaching and teaching, and they've sat and listened to him. And that occurred after they watched him heal people and give all kinds of support and care for those who never had it before. And now he's kind of outlining their job description. And I think that the Beatitudes are our job description too. So I invite you to take out your flyer again and your bulletin and look at them. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I don't know about you, but after the news of another shooting, I was pretty devastated last night. And it was comforting to know that this is part of what we live with. Being the poor in spirit and allowing these circumstances to touch us and change us is part of what we're called to do. We are mourners for all that has happened in this world and that continues to happen. And that's important because when we mourn and let other people see that, it says it's not right. It's not okay. And we share that message with those around us. It's one more way to work for change. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. I don't know about you all, but meekness has not been a quality I've seen lately, especially in our government. And I think it's such an important quality because the meek are not the people that, too often we've associated meek with people who get just trampled on. But that's not what meek is. Meek is saying, I don't need to be the first of the line. I'm not the most important. Someone who's meek has the space to stop and look at who needs what. Someone who is meek notices other people and notices their pain. Meekness is a quality that we are supposed to have. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. We are to be hungering and thirsting for this. Think about the last time you were really thirsty. That's what our thirst for righteousness should look like. If you could imagine righteousness in this country right now, what would you see? What would it be like? People would have enough to eat. They would be able to find a home that they could afford. They wouldn't be out on the streets. All of our kids would get an excellent education. That's what we are about. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Think about a time when you received mercy in your life. Mercy is usually not something we should be receiving. Somebody gives us mercy, generally speaking, when we have done them wrong. I was really grateful. I almost ran into the back of a car the other day, and the person who was driving it waved and smiled at me. Now, maybe they were just relieved, but I was so grateful that there weren't bad words in that or finger gestures that I didn't want to see. When we can be merciful to others, it changes everything. Blessed are the pure of heart. That's one that I've always struggled with. What does it really mean to be the pure of heart? And somebody said to me, a person who has a pure heart can see the good amidst all the bad, can find the good in others even when others can't. That's a quality that we should have. Imagine if everybody in this church went out and looked for the pure of heart in everybody else. It's there. We all have it. We all desperately want to be able to live that way. But a lot of times things get in the way. Sometimes it's us that gets in the way. Our anger or desires we have that we shouldn't have, our frustrations. But then there's also the world that gets in the way. It's not easy, but that's what we're called to do. Because if we can exhibit that quality, if we can exhibit that focus of the pure of heart, we will impact everybody else around us. I think about the last time I got angry at somebody, and they tolerated my anger and were kind to me in return. And that deflated every bit of anger that was in my heart. Blessed are those who are persecuted. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteous sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We've seen far too many people in this country who've been persecuted for being who they are. I think our job as people of faith is to be persecuted for what should be. I think our voices should be the ones that are heard. I think we should be the ones saying, no, these things have to change. No, we really need to look at policing in this country. It's not simple, it's complicated, but we have to be able to stand with the police and say, how can we help you? How can we change this? We need to do the same thing for people who are on the streets. We need to do the same thing for people who are dealing with drug addictions. We need to be able to stand with them. We need to be able to feel the same persecution that they feel. We need to speak for change. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. When's the last time that somebody reviled you? It happens more often than we know. It happens more often than we're willing to admit. Not just because of our faith, but because of who we are in the world. If we're people following Jesus, we're going to run into this because there are people who don't want that in their lives. But it's so important. It's so important. Because when you can take being reviled and persecuted and turn it around to kindness and love, it changes everything. Think of the people we know that did that. Martin Luther King is the first example that comes to mind. Every time, every place he went, he was reviled and persecuted. And yet it didn't stop him. He turned around in love. Think about somebody you know, because we all know someone who's really good at this, who can take anger and hatred and turn it around. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, In the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. We follow a line of people who were brave enough to do the right thing. If there's anything that I could wish for Trinity, it's that we never stop doing that. We have a long history. I've been here 10 years, but I know that at least 15 years before that, people were already fighting for people who were gay and lesbian and said that they should be welcomed here. People were already fighting for equal rights for all people. People were already fighting to welcome anybody in church. That's our heritage. Trinity has spent 50 years working to change the lives of people who come here, but more importantly, working to change the world around us, working to make Sacramento a better place, working to spread God's love. And that's our calling, each and every one of us. Whether it's done one-to-one on a daily basis with people you know, or whether it's by making a bigger gesture that's out on the streets in a protest, or maybe it's working with law enforcement, or maybe it's working with local city councils to make changes. It's who we're called to be. We were never meant to sit in the pews and not carry God with us out the door and share God with the rest of the world. If that's one thing that my time here has taught me, and I've seen it in all of you, I've seen it in the respite center, I've seen it in the dinners we've offered, I've seen it in people protesting, I've seen it for over 10 years now. It's who we're called to be and what we're called to do. So I want to ask you today to think about that and what you can do to continue that process. It doesn't have to be big. It can be small. But how do we continue as a church who's made change, not only here, but in the world? Not only here in Sacramento, but in the world. When we have taken our kids on trips to other places, and we've been to a lot of places, one of the things that they do is they carry us with them. And we have the gift of amazing young people who can share that love. I'm so proud of all of these guys and the many others, and the ones now who are graduated and working. Because of you, they've carried this message of love to everybody they've met in the world. So I want to ask you, think about that. What's next? How can we continue that? It's a legacy that I think is more important than any of us realizes. Amen.